Hi, everyone. This is Ryan Lillis with the Sacramento Bee. Thank you for joining us on this Facebook Live. I'd like to bring in Mayor Daryl Steinberg for a discussion. Hey, Mayor, how are you?
How you doing, Ryan? You're looking good.
Well, thank you. Yes, we have some new personalized masks here at the Bee. Wanted to set up the first question. I know you've had some opinions about mask wearing in public, and so I'm going to take this off because it's really uncomfortable in my house. But one of the main questions we're hearing a lot from readers is what should the guidance be wearing masks when the restrictions start to ease here locally, and just try to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I actually think the two go together. I think wearing masks is the right thing now, but certainly as we begin returning back to some semblance of normal, as we begin opening industries as early as this Friday, there was some retail, manufacturing, childcare soon thereafter, I hope, some restaurants, even the potential of movie theaters, certainly office buildings. As we return, I think it is extra vital that we take extra precautions, because here's the thing. We don't have enough testing in the country to make any kind of return foolproof. In our county, we're increasing our testing and doing well. I know the county's going to announce they're going to open a couple of sites in neighborhoods. We're going to get up to a couple thousand tests a day, comparable, if not more, than what the statewide per capita average is. But we're not going to have foolproof testing. So as we go back, which we have to, because the status quo in terms of the impact on people, on working people, on businesses is not sustainable. We have to go back in a way that is a little bit cautious, because not only do we not want to see a spike in infections and more people get sick or die, that's obvious. But if in fact Sacramento has a spike, which we have not seen, thank God, we then have to go backwards on the stay-at-home order. And it will last longer and potentially be more restrictive. So what are the ways that we can move forward, but assure ourselves that we're doing everything in our power to minimize that risk of a spike? And I think masks, though they're not foolproof, I think they are an important addition. And I'm not saying you have to wear a mask in your house, by the way. That's your choice.
The style choice.
It was an excellent style statement. I will give you that. But when, or even when you're running, out in the park, but when you're amongst a group of people, certainly when you're entering a place of business, or you're entering a food establishment, or you're in any kind of a group setting outside of your home, I think masks should be mandatory, because I think it will be that extra level of assurance and protection that we can move forward on this recovery, that we can move forward on the reopening and don't have to go backwards.
You seem, are you anxious to see things reopening?
I am anxious to see things reopening, but I'm also nervous at the same time. I'm anxious because, I just got off a call with a number of community leaders from our diverse neighborhoods in Sacramento, and the suffering out there is real. It may be a lifestyle adjustment for me in terms of doing my job as mayor, largely from my den instead of throughout the community and City Hall. That's nothing. But there are thousands of people out there that have lost jobs, that have been furloughed, that cannot continue to operate their business. And those are the people that I am worried about. And so, yes, returning to opening the economy in the right way is not just a wouldn't it be nice if. It is essential, but only if it's done in the right way. It's a false choice if we have to, or it's a very negative choice. If we have to choose between public health and reopening the economy in the right way, we need to do both. It's not a matter of if. It's now not much of a matter of when, although we know it's now days and maybe a week or two. It's a question of how. The how is what's important. And we've got to reopen in a way that says this virus is still out there, it could come back, and we're going to take every precaution.
What is your sense? I know you mentioned Friday, there's going to be some retail reopening. with some curbside restrictions. The one kind of sector that I think a lot of people are anxious to see reopened is restaurants, right? Getting back their community gathering spots. They're such a huge part of Sacramento's culture and our economy. What is your sense for when we will be able to dine in a restaurant, and then what will that look like?
Well, so restaurants fall maybe the early part of stage 3 or maybe the latter part of stage 2, because what the governor said on Tuesday, which I think was a very consequential announcement, is that he is going to give counties the discretion to move faster if they choose on restaurants, as one example. If we can show that we've got a contact tracing program up and running, I can explain that. In fact, we're working on that in real time with the county. If we have sufficient testing, and again, there isn't enough testing, but sufficient testing. If we assure that our hospitals and healthcare systems have enough capacity, which they do. If we've remained flat, relatively flat in terms of deaths, hospitalizations, and cases, which largely we have in Sacramento. You reported that we're the lowest infection rate regionally, not just the city or the county, but regionally in the entire country. If we can certify that we meet all of those conditions, then counties can choose, and our county can choose, and I would support it, to reopen restaurants as an example. But it's going to be a very, very different experience, because in order to comply with whatever the county order ends up being, whatever the state guidelines end up being, restaurants are going to have to reduce their seating capacity because there's going to have to be necessary physical distancing. Waiters, waitresses, they're going to have to wear masks. Now, the people in the restaurants probably should wear masks as well until their meal is served. I don't think they figured out the masks yet that have the slit in the in the middle.
Maybe feed bags or something like
Yeah, something like that. But that may be coming, and so I think that in the near term we're going to be able to return to a very different form of dining. Now, here's the real question. Will people, the consumers, the buyers, want to go back? And I will say this, if we are doing this in the right way, the masks being one example, I believe the people will have the confidence to go back slowly, but certainly to begin to patronize our wonderful restaurants in Sacramento and help bring that industry back. But we'll see what the governor says on Thursday about the latest guidance. The county then needs to make a determination about whether or not they want to go into the next phase, because that will be county by county. And then we'll have to certify that we are far enough along in terms of testing, in terms of preparation, and in terms of spacing and protocol to be able to open various industries. It's all going to happen. The real question is, can we maintain it once we begin that reopening? The answer to that question must be yes. And then what can we do that's within our power to make sure that we don't go backwards?
Yeah. And I mean, so do you feel that, as you mentioned our analysis that showed our metro area is at the lowest infection rate in the nation. Hospitalizations and ICU visits are relatively low here in Sacramento. We're, fewer than a dozen new infections a day. The tracing, is beefing up here locally. Do you feel like Sacramento County should be in that first wave that starts to kind of reopen and more aggressively than, say, a San Francisco or a Los Angeles that may have to wait longer?
I don't know about the other jurisdictions, but I would support a more aggressive approach in reopening if it is coupled with the right precautions. And if we meet those tests, which I laid out a moment ago in those categories, I think we are either close or we will meet them depending upon what they are because of what we have done. So yes, I do support going back, but I want to make sure that we do it in a safe way.
And I don't mean to just focus on restaurants because there's so much else, right? There's hair salons and barbers and playgrounds. We got a lot of questions today from people whose kids have been cooped up now for 7 or 8 weeks. When will we be able to be back on playgrounds, say, in all of our city parks?
Well, that is another one. I would hope that we'd be able to do that in one of the next phases as well. But that's going to require a lot of self-responsibility as well. Parents are going to have to bring sanitation equipment with them. They're going to have to make sure that they're washing their kids' hands constantly at the park, that they're actually spraying the playground equipment before they allow their kids to play. It's going to require a number of extra layers of protection and of work and of consciousness from all of us in order to be able to do that safely.
Do you worry at all about, because it's not like we're in a silo here. Californians move around the state. Are you worried about another county? Say, Sutter County was pretty aggressive and they opened up a lot. In fact, the mall in Yuba City opened today. Are you worried about a neighboring county maybe being a little bit more aggressive, and whether that could have an effect on either our hospitalizations or infections spreading to our county? Do you worry about other counties moving too aggressively?
I do. I mean, that's why, the state's role, and I think it is the appropriate role, is to sort of set the limit and to say that we expect you to do at least this. Now, some of those counties have violated the existing state order. And as the governor said yesterday, he thinks that they were wrong to do so. And I agree, because it's one thing to express your freedom and your self-determination. But when your exercise of the way you interpret freedom affects the health of others who are making different and safer decisions, I don't think that is right. There's a statewide order for a reason. Now, what the governor, though, has said is that he is going to begin, and the state is going to begin, relaxing the state order. So consistent with that, he's going to leave some discretion for us to go at various speeds in terms of what we reopen and how we reopen it. That's fine, but that's not what some of the counties in question have done over the last couple of days. And I am concerned about that, because this virus does not know artificial borders or boundaries. But all we can do now is move forward and control what we can control. And in Sacramento County, I support a more assertive reopening, so long as we are looking over our shoulder a little bit, or a lot, especially in the first days and weeks, and coupling it with the right protection.
Shifting gears a little, big day of giving is coming up. I don't want you to choose favorites here, but do you have a few charities who you'll be donating to, or that you'd like to, promote?
Well, I think I would rather talk about sectors, because there are so many needs out there in our community now. And certainly I would give a big shout out to our arts organizations, because talk about the definition of having to shut down. I mean, just like sports, but the arts in an even more profound way, they have not been able to put on live performances for weeks now. And it's obviously going to last months, because congregate get-togethers, large gatherings, are going to be the last things that come on back. And so I would encourage you to take your favorite arts organization and to donate generously. If you were a season ticket holder, and pay as if you were going to attend a performance, and think of that as your giving and your charity, because you want what you love so much to be able to come back.
You can donate to the Bee too. I invite you. The least you could do is mention the Bee.
I hope we were.
That was a gotcha question.
We were going to get to a point in the conversation where we were going to talk about the importance of independent journalism, not just in Sacramento, but in the country, and why this effort to save the Bee and make sure that the Bee comes out of this bankruptcy in even better shape, with the right ownership that elevates the importance of local coverage, of state coverage with the state capitol, and of doing what you guys, and I'm not false flattery here, because I know you cover me hard too, is what you've done during the coronavirus. I mean, that you have covered this, and your veteran and new reporters with the level of detail and information that people need. And so, yes, whether it's the big day of giving or any days afterwards, making sure that the Bee remains the civic asset that it has been for a century or more is a high priority for me and our entire city.
Go on. Is there more? No, I'm just kidding.
No.
I know. Thank you, Mayor. We appreciate that.
We've been talking about, and I'm involved, just so you know, and I'm involved in trying to help find the right ownership for the B. This bankruptcy process is murky, and there may be several stages to it. I know there was a new story out today about a July date for potential sale. In the end, what I'm concerned about and what I'm trying to help with, even in a small way, is to ensure that whoever owns or controls the Bees, the Sacramento Bees, and hopefully the other California papers, that they are committed to journalism as a vital part of democracy, not just as, you know, another business asset that can be discarded. And so it's as important as any other cultural or civic asset that we care about in our community.
I guess speaking of organizations facing some interesting financial times, the city, obviously, this has had a huge impact, on sales tax revenue, especially. Sounds like the city, yourself and the city manager are confident you'll be able to at least weather it in the short term without any kind of drastic service cuts or layoffs. What can you say to people about the state of the budget, whether we'll see service reduction? And then on top of that, also the $89 million federal stimulus money the city's getting. What are your plans? Are you be able to develop plans on that yet?
Yeah, so the two parts of the question actually go together, because you know that a big part of my first term as mayor was promoting this sales tax, Measure U. And my idea was and remains that we would raise an additional half cent. This was in 2018, and we dedicate the money to investing in our disadvantaged neighborhoods, in affordable housing and workforce development, in revitalizing our commercial corridors, and a whole host of other economic development strategies. And we got off to a really good start. Then COVID-19 hits, and we estimate that our tax revenue over the next year and a half is going to drop by almost $90 million. So what's left of that second half cent really has to go, at least in the short run, to balancing the budget. Without that second half cent, I will say, Sacramento would be in a world of hurt. And even though this is a terrible time for everyone, and it won't be easy in terms of the city finances, compared to a lot of other cities throughout the state and around the country, we are blessed. I mean, call it luck, but maybe luck, as they say, is when preparation meets opportunity. Because we have that extra money, we are able to forestall layoffs, deep cuts to essential services. We might avoid any cuts over the next year plus, and hopefully then we come out of this. So then you say, well, okay, great, Mayor. Now you're spending that on balancing the budget. What about all those promises you made to the neighborhoods? Well, our 2018 census population, 508,000. The cutoff was 500,000 to receive a direct federal stimulus. I say growth is good. Sustainable growth is good because we met the threshold. Now we have $89 million. One time, tomorrow I'm going to put out a mayor's budget letter where I'm going to suggest a structure for how we should invest these dollars. And I won't, give away the story before I have the chance to finish the letter and get it out tomorrow. But essentially, there are 4 lead categories here. And we must balance, by the way, the assistance that is needed on an urgent basis, on an emergency basis now for individuals and small businesses. Although if we spend it all, for example, on rent relief, that money would go very, very fast. So it needs to be a combination between emergency response and investing in our longer term economic objectives that has become even more necessary because of the disruption of COVID-19. So category 1, small business assistance in a variety of forms. Category number 2, workforce development for youth and adults. Category 3, housing and homelessness. Category 4, tourism, arts, and the creative economy. and enough money left over to be able to address any investments we may need to make or want to make in protective equipment or testing or anything else directly related to COVID-19. So I see this as a great opportunity, and it's not perfect. It has to be related to COVID-19. It's not quite Measure U, but I think we can achieve the same goals. I think the city, relatively compared to others, is in a good financial position considering what the alternative might be.
Yeah. Yeah. And you touched on rent and renters. And, before this crisis, we had some of the highest rent increases year over year in the nation. You hear stories about the kind of the character of neighborhoods changing as people get priced out of one neighborhood and move to another neighborhood, whether that's Oak Park or Mack Road or North Sacramento. Is enough being done to protect the city's renters, many of whom are these frontline workers right now during the coronavirus crisis, the people who are stocking our grocery shelves and keeping society running? Are we doing enough to protect them so that in 3 or 4 months, if things slowly start to return to normal, they'll have a place to live?
Well, I would say that we are doing enough in the short term because we passed ordinances within the first 2 weeks of the pandemic that limited the ability for tenants either on the residential or commercial side to be evicted if they could not pay their rent because they've lost income due to the coronavirus. But it isn't absolute rent relief. In fact, the renters, even if they can't be evicted rightfully now, are still going to owe the rent. And so when we come out of this, let's say it's 3 or 4 months from now, what I worry about, and what I know a lot of people worry about, is those renters on the residential and commercial side are then going to have to pay a lot of back rent,
right?
Plus pay their monthly rent. And so we have to grapple with that. And we have to figure out how we are going to work with our landlord community, our property owners, with our tenants, and also with the banks and the mortgage holders who have a stake in this as well. Because while everybody up the chain, of course, needs to get paid, they also don't want to see huge vacancy rates in the properties they own, or owners foreclosing to the mortgage companies, because then the whole system unravels and the situation gets worse. So it's going to have to be a combination of some direct financial infusion, either from, whether it's from the local government, although I don't know where we get the money, because even our $89 million won't go very far if we spend it all on that. We don't want to spend it just on that one aspect of the crisis. But we're also going to have to figure out, and the state's going to have to figure out, how we set up appropriate payment plans that allow people to, make up what they owe, but in a way that allows them to stay housed. We must be committed to keeping people in the housing that they have now. If they face long-term challenges through no fault of their own, because they've been laid off or furloughed or lost their business as a result of COVID-19. So we've done well for the short term, but we're just beginning, I think, to address very steep challenges as we go forward.
Yeah. I mean, how much do you worry about this kind of being a resetting of some ways where we do lose that kind of, for better, heart and soul, or that kind of the heart and soul of the city, and that it just widens the gap between the haves and the have-nots? Just things we've seen in places like San Francisco and Seattle before this. I know you and I have talked about that in the past before this all happened, and kind of the efforts Sacramento has taken to avoid those same kind of mistakes. I mean, does something like this have the potential to just exasperate that process here?
There's no question that the crisis has exacerbated the already existing inequities that exist in our community. And so, but we're not alone. This is not just a Sacramento challenge, it's a state and a national challenge. I hope more help is on the way, especially from the federal government, because the state budget is going to be in a world of hurt. But I'm not going to wring my hands, and I know none of my colleagues are going to either. I see the very difficult challenge ahead around the very issue we just talked about, and it's one of many. What do we do about the renters on either the residential or commercial side that have all this back rent due, can't pay it, and even if they're not evicted today, they're going to be subject potentially to eviction when the eviction protection runs out. I see it, but I'm not going to wring my hands and say, oh God, what are we going to do? We've got to figure out how to solve it. It's going to have to be a shared responsibility and a shared burden between all the stakeholders, the government, the tenants, the landlords, and those who issue the mortgages. And we're going to have to partner in a way that in the bottom line assures people get paid over time, but that no one loses their housing. Not going to be easy, but we can do it.
On the homeless, which I know is something that you've worked an awful lot on over the last few years, there's progress, although it sounds like slightly delayed on two shelters here in the city. Has coronavirus though at all changed your thinking on how we shelter the homeless? You know, one thing that has occurred to myself and some other journalists at the B is it realistic to have 200 people under one roof right now in a shelter, given coronavirus and how quickly it spread and how it has spread in some shelters in San Francisco and other places?
Well, the homeless issue has become even more complicated. In some ways, more opportunities, in some way, more challenges. On the challenge side, for example, because the jail was crowded and there was a fear of the virus spreading in the jail, there have been a lot of no bail releases. The Chief Justice issued an order, and it was a public health order around avoiding the risk in the jails. That has exacerbated the homeless problem now in the River District. Numbers in some ways are increasing. I know the Downtown Partnership has reported increasing numbers. At the same time, we are actually working in better partnership with the county as a city than we ever have before. And together, we are standing up, as you know, 990 discrete rooms, mostly motel rooms, and some of these trailers out at Cal Expo. On the motel side, they've already leased 3 motels. They're on the cusp of leasing a 4th motel. They're filling it up. We're now well over 300 rooms filled. We've got to get to that 800 number, but there's progress. Last night we met as a city council to begin the work of thinking through, okay, how do we rehouse people then who we put in these motels temporarily once the emergency ends and the significant federal reimbursement ends as well. And so there's a tremendous opportunity in terms of the way we shelter people. You're right, we have a new challenge. I mean, we're going to follow through on our sprung shelter, for example, at WX under the freeway, and the women's shelter at Meadowview. It is going to be a congregate shelter. It's going to be of high quality. We may have to admit, if you will, or allow fewer people because the spacing requirements may in fact be different. But here's one thing I just want to add to that whole thing. And I talk about this a lot. We've got a missing middle here when it comes to homelessness. We're going to stand up, and we are standing up, a lot of temporary shelter between the motels and the city's plans to build these sprung shelters, Capitol Park Hotel. And we know how to do permanent supportive housing. But that takes a long time, and it's expensive. The missing middle is where we need to focus. I want to see us purchase in bulk a lot of these efficiency housing units. And there are a lot of models. There's pallet homes, there's cabin communities, there's micro pads, there's stacked modular units. I want us to purchase in bulk because here's what we do too often as government and as a city. We try to find the perfect project and then order the inventory. I want us to order the inventory and then go find places to put these tiny homes, because we got to get people indoors. And even if the efficiency homes, by the way, they're very high quality, don't last for 15 to 30 years, and you can't apply the traditional federal housing funding formula to buying them and constructing them. If they are sufficient housing for 3 to 5 years for someone who is out on the street, or a student who doesn't, have a place to live, then that would be a great investment for the city. So I really want to make a breakthrough there. We're doing our first tiny home project in North Sacramento off of Grove Avenue. And I think that'll be a big success centered around transition age kids. But I want us to buy these tiny homes in bulk. And then I want us to go find the places to put them and partner with the right community-based organizations to get more people indoors. And
do you have the money for that, to buy those? I mean, is it the stimulus money, or is it?
Well, we do have money. We got $5 million from Kaiser. I've been out there on the hustings asking quite a bit. When I chaired the Big 13 mayors, we were able to get significant direct assistance from the state to cities through the so-called HEAP and HAP funds. And yes, we got significant federal stimulus dollars. And some of the money, the state money we're spending, will now be reimbursed a second time by the feds at 75%. And so money is always an issue, but I think we will always find the money. And yes, we have the money to be able to look at what we're doing. I mean, we're doing WX, we're doing Meadowview, we're doing Capitol Park, we're working with the county on the motels, we got the trailers, we're working on a rehousing program. I mean, there is a lot of momentum here, but we need more inventory, and we'll find the money to do it.
All right. Besides sitting through 5-hour city council meetings, what do you miss the most about the current situation?
Well, you really hit on it, because I missed the lengthy city council meeting.
I have to say, I'm personally offended that after 10 years of sitting through those meetings in person, you now are doing them virtually. If I could watch them from my living room, I would,
I will tell you, it is an odd experience to do the public business virtually. I mean, who's raising their hand here? Who wants to ask a question? And yesterday, of course, because public input is so important, we established the old telephone where people could call in. We had a few technical hiccups, but we'll get that right next week. When Joe Cerna was the mayor and I was a young council member, they used to do public comment for people in person, of course, but people every week could call in who could not make it to City Hall. And what the heck, the telephone still works. My wife always threatened to call and to say, call in and ask publicly, what time are you getting home, and can you please stop at the grocery store on your way?
I was going to say, those every mayor's dream. You can just pretend you have a bad connection, or and you don't like what somebody's saying to you, right?
That would, yes, but I would never do that, because
I'm not suggesting you would, right?
Because I want to hear from everyone. But no, life has changed, and certainly it has been a different experience to be mayor. Mostly from the den of my home. It took me a couple of weeks to adjust to it. Well, like everybody, it just kind of felt a little out of sorts, but I've gotten my mojo back. I feel like the city has really stepped up. I'm just so proud of the city and the city team around this incredible food effort, the restaurants and the seniors, and all the work that we are doing to fill the gaps in so many different areas. And so I look forward to resuming a different way of doing it, because, the job of being mayor is to be out there. It's to be with the people, and it's also where I get my energy. But my mind always goes to the people in our community who are having a tough time. And that's going to continue to be our focus, and this 89 million is one important way that we can make a difference.
So will it be 1 hour or 2 hours after the order is lit before you're at Sherry's for for a piece of pie?
Now, Ryan and I, the day after I got elected, my first term, and Ryan met me at Sherry's early in the morning, which is a great local restaurant in the Greenhaven area, great pie. And you know, I bet I will be there pretty quickly.
I don't blame you.
Because, you know, because I can walk. And man, you know, I've said this before, we all take for granted the simple things in life, I think. And, you know, sometimes we get worn down or run down, you know, like for me, oh, I got another event. What time am I going to get home? I don't think I will ever take for granted again what it means to be among community. I really don't. I don't think I will ever take for granted again what it means to be at an event, to be with other people, and to be, you know, working on something together in person. I don't think I'll ever take for granted again, you know, being in the park, having a picnic. I mean, the things that are just so easy to assume are always going to be, we've learned over these weeks that they're precious, and that it's very different when we can't see each other and we can't interact and we can't, I don't know whether we will ever shake hands again, but whether, you know, we can't hug somebody. And I do think that that is going to be one of the real positive things that come out of this, is the appreciation for what we have, for what our community is about, and for what we are all trying to do together. I don't know. I'm not Pollyannish about it. It's been a tough time. It's been tough for me personally, but I do think I will have a greater level of appreciation for what it really means to be able to be in person with friends, with family, and with the community.
Yeah. Thank you for that perspective, Mayor. And you've been very generous with your time, as always. Thanks for doing this every week for us. I know the readers and the viewers really appreciate just having that kind of direct, if you will, if not virtual access to their mayor. And so it means a lot to us. It means a lot to the citizens here. So I thank you so much again for your time, Mayor. Thank you so much, Ryan. I look forward to doing it again soon. Be well, everybody. Thanks. You too, Mayor. Thanks. All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Mayor Steinberg hopefully will join us again next week. But for now, this is Ryan Lillis with the Sacramento Bee. Thanks.